Now, our guest speaker tonight is Mr. Guy Stephen Needler. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Guy. There's an awful lot to tell, so I'm going to make it very, very short. So, Guy initially trained as a mechanical engineer, and he quickly became a chartered electrical and electronics engineer. However, he was always aware of the greater reality around him, as he regularly caught glimpses of the world of spirit, as a lot of people here do as well, I know. So from his teens to his early 20s, these glimpses drew him to read extensively about the subject and meditate intensively. He eventually became a Reiki master and pursued a 4-year commitment to learn energy and vibrational therapy techniques. Now, after extensive studying, he became a member of the Complementary Medical Association. And during his training as an energy healer, Guy learned that he was able, via meditation, to traverse the frequencies above those associated with the auric layers. I don't know if that means much to you, but you'll find out. Now, during these trips to the higher frequencies, he discovered he could communicate with the energetic entities that existed on the various levels of our multi-universe then. Now, these communications eventually led to the preparation of published manuscripts. Now, Guy has regularly spoken at various different conferences. He's been on the radio, and he's also the author of many books. I believe if he was asked to describe himself, he would probably say he was an author and pioneer of spiritual physics. Yeah. So his talks tonight, and he's doing 2. One is aliens, who are they, which is on the board there. Where do they come from? And then the second half will be devoted to a talk called The Road to Sentience and the Greater Reality. So each talk's about an hour. Maybe you'll condense it down just a little bit, so you can have a comfort break in between. I won't keep any longer. That's it. Please give your warm welcome to Mr. Guy Stephen Needler.
I think Freddie Mercury did this, didn't he? Absolutely rattled around. Well, thank you for coming. Quite a lot, actually. Was it about 60?
About 60.
About 60, it's fantastic. It's wonderful. I've travelled all the way from Gavin and Stacey land. I've just moved down to Barry, so I'm not too far away now. I used to be in Birmingham, which is the sort of absolute black hole of the UK. So this particular presentation has come as a result of a number of different channeled works within the first book, The History of God, but it's also sort of splattered around the other books, the Beyond the Source books, and specifically the Origin Speaks. So, but it's quite interesting because it can give you a different perspective on what aliens are, what their vehicles they travel around in are, and where they come from. So let's have a look at what the agenda is. Basically, it's just as I've said. We're going to look at the 4 different genres of alien form, okay? The 3 different types of vehicle they use, where they're located within the universe or beyond, and right at the very end I'm going to give you a few reasons for what abductions may or might not be and why we have them. This is just as an example. Okay, so you can flick through 2 now. That's it, one more.
Next.
Yeah. Before we go anywhere else, I just want to set the scene a bit. We exist in a multiversal environment, and scientists are sort of acknowledging this now. Specifically, Stephen Hawking said we existed in an 11-dimensional condition, which he missed out 1 dimension, where the physical universe is. I'll describe the structure of the multiverse first, and it'll give you some sort of foundation to help you understand where I'm coming from with the rest of the presentation. A multiverse is created through 12 dimensions, and a dimension is a much larger piece of structure than what mankind calls a dimension. Yeah? The so-called 3D world that we exist in is simply a metric, to describe 3 dimensions of height, width and breadth. It's not specifically a function of the structure of the multiverse. It's simply a way of describing volume. So try to detach scientists' understanding of what a dimension is versus what I'm about to tell you. A dimension is a higher piece of structure, one of a number of different levels of structure that exist within our creator. Okay, what we sometimes call God. I don't like to call it that because I'm not religious. And it brings all sorts of incorrect thought processes around it. But within the multiverse, these 12 dimensions split out into various different segments. Now, the first full dimension changes the game a little bit, so I'm not going to mention that first. I'm going to talk about the second full dimension up to the 12th full dimension. From those sort of 11 dimensions, each of them split out into 3 sub-dimensional components, and then they further split out into 12 frequency bands or levels. And each of those frequency bands or levels has the capability of, and does support, a self-contained, simultaneous, not parallel, that's something else, but I'll talk about it maybe in the second presentation. So a simultaneous universe in its own right. So we have 11 times 3 times 12, which is 396 different frequency levels, and therefore 396 different universes. The first full dimension is different. It houses all the lowest frequencies associated with our multiversal environment. So although it splits out into 3 subdimensions, as the other 11 do, it compresses or compacts back into a composite subdimension, which only allows 12 frequencies to be created. And those 12 frequencies are all required, all together, not of any combination of 1 or 2 and then 12 and 11, but all together, all 12 of them, to create a universe, the physical universe. And that's because they're all the lowest frequencies. So the physical universe is rather unique, and so subsequently the first full dimension is somewhat unique, because it's the only full dimension within the multiverse that has only one universe attached to it, and the physical universe is the only universe that has 12 frequencies associated with it. What we exist within is the first 10, and I'll explain a bit more about this later. What you're seeing now is the first 3. Okay. So we're going to talk about the first part of this particular presentation, which is the 4 different forms or genres of being that we see. Okay, one more. All entities that we see in the physical universe are bodies that we use to incarnate into. We don't exist as physical forms. We just use the physical form as a vehicle to be able to experience a low-frequency environment. That low-frequency environment being the physical, okay, the gross physical. And so we use them to experience, learn and evolve in an accelerated way through experiencing a level of hardship. If you consider that we're normally energetic beings and we're part of a much bigger being, and that bigger being or entity is created by our creator, our source, and if you look at some of the text, you'll realise that some of the aliens that have been communicated with, and Dolores Cannon, do you all know Dolores Cannon at all? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, well, Dolores Cannon was my benefactor, and fortunately she took me under her wing and helped to publish the books. But she also noted that a lot of the entities, or the incarnate entities that she communicated with under hypnosis, also recognised that they were part of a much bigger entity or being called the Source, and that's consistent with the information I've got. And so the human body, along with various different alternative form factors spread out around the universe, the physical universe, are simply vehicles that we use to experience the universe and the different frequencies, the 12 frequencies within that particular universe. Okay. Remember, the physical universe has 12 frequencies. What we see here is just the first 3. We can't see the 4th frequency level. We can't see what's on the 4th frequency level. We can't perceive it, touch it, taste it, or know it's there, see it at all. What's on the 4th frequency, you can see us though, but you can't see what's on the 5th. What's on the 5th, you can't see what's on the 6th, but you can see what's on the 5th, 4th and 3rd. So we live in an environment, an incarnate environment, where those of a higher frequency can see those of a lower frequency, and if they wish, they can come down the frequencies to interact with them. But you can't go upwards, because that takes work, hard work. Okay? Okay, next one. Before I go any further, the images I'm using in this presentation, by the way, I've taken from the internet. And I've not created them myself, they just happen to be useful examples of some of the form factors that we may encounter in the rest of the gross physical and higher frequential levels associated with the locations within the physical universe. So don't pay too much attention to the accuracy, but it gives you an idea of what I'm about to describe. So the first alien form factor, okay, exists in the gross physical aspect of the universe. Okay? The first three frequencies, the gross physical, what we see now. Now, what we also need to understand is that the human form, and these are the forms that exist in the first three frequencies, exist in more than one frequency concurrently. So what creates the gross physical isn't just in the gross physical, there's other higher frequency aspects of it that allow it to exist. The human form is quite complicated. It uses 10 frequencies within the 12 frequencies of the physical universe to create it. The first three, the 10th, 9th and 8th, are like a step-down function that allows the higher frequency aspect that's projected down from something I call the true energetic self, which Dolores called the oversoul, some of us call the higher self, and the Hindus call the Godhead, splitting a small part of itself off, what we call the soul, into a body. Okay? So it comes down, this sort of step-down function, into the 7th, 6th, 5th and 4th. These are the astral levels. I'll explain those in a bit longer. Gradually getting lower and lower, creating this series of templates that allow the gross physical to manifest. So if you can think about any form factor you see on Earth, any of the insects, any of the animals, any of the fishes, any of the invertebrates, the bacteria, any of these different form factors, there is likely to be something similar, either within the gross physical frequencies or higher within the physical universe. The Earth is a particularly excellent example of the plethora of different body types which we could use as incarnate beings. So the gross physical is basically what we are now, and the different entities that are sometimes seen, whether you call them greys or whites or reptilian types or any other form factors, they are basically, if you can see them with the physical eye, they're generally within the first three frequencies associated with the physical universe. They're gross physical. Okay, next one. The next form factor is in something that's called the spirituo-physical. Some people call it the astral levels. Okay? The spirituo-physical version is above the gross physical. It's still incarnation, it's still physical, but it's just not gross physical, and it's not something that we can interact with here. Okay? Now we know that these things exist in higher frequencies because we have machines that use radio waves, in the gigahertz range and above, X-rays. Okay? All these different things exist because we've got machines to be able to work with various different frequencies. But these entities, these incarnate bodies, are above these frequencies. So none of our machines can see them right now. Although that's not specifically true, because with the advent of digital photography, the technology that's used isn't particularly accurate. And so rather than picking up the frequencies that the human eye sees, which is between the 400 to 700 nanometer range, which is very narrow, extremely narrow, it also sees things that are well above that, in 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 nanometer range. And the software in the cameras tries to, so we say, transpose the image that it's picking up at these different levels, because the sensors, these megapixels that are used, create an image that's susceptible to be manipulated by the software. And so we sometimes see orbs. Okay? How many of you have seen orbs in your photographs, the digital photographs? Yeah? These are generally energetic entities, rather than higher frequency incarnate entities. So this spiritual physical level is still incarnation, but it's from the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th levels. We call them the astral levels, although sometimes the astral levels with spiritual people are compressed into the first frequency level. That's because they don't understand. As individuals who can meditate and channel information, or gain information from other sources, which includes incarnate entities that have travelled to the earth, we sometimes can't understand the information we're being given, because we don't have the education to be able to be expansive enough to understand or make that leap of technological or educational level to be able to understand it. Think about how you'd explain a computer to somebody who lived in the medieval age. They wouldn't understand. And if you did try to tell them, they'd probably burn you at the stake for being a witch. Okay? So sometimes the information we get is not specifically accurate because we don't understand it. And so the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th are what we call the astral levels. The 4th being the lower astral, the 5th being the upper lower astral, the 6th being the lower upper astral, and the 7th being the upper astral. So these levels are where the next level upwards of incarnate body type or vehicle, what we use to experience the physical universe, come from. And those are the sort of spiritual descriptions of those frequencies. Next one. Now, while we're here on this particular level, we've only got 5 senses, haven't we? We might have one sometimes. What do we call that? Anybody got any ideas? ESP, intuition, gut feeling?
Sixth sense.
Sixth sense, yeah. Sometimes people can see ghosts and things or see other entities if they're high enough frequency. And if their physiology and their energetics and their evolution level allows them to overlay what they're perceiving with their spiritual third eye, which is part of the energetic template structure of that which creates the human form, is overlaid in their gross physical sight. But when you're at a different level, these body types are a higher frequency. And so, although we start to lose a lot of functionality when we incarnate into lower vehicles because of the loss of frequency, which creates a dramatic loss of communicative and functional bandwidth. Imagine trying to communicate with somebody who's using a ZX Spectrum from the 1970s compared to what you've got now with your new phones that are almost like a computer. The computer that they had in the 1970s wouldn't be able to communicate with a very, very basic mobile phone now because of the ability to work with the information. There was no internet then. There was only dial-up speeds. And dial-up speeds were in the bytes range, not even the kilobytes range. Technology these days needs megabytes of communication in seconds, sometimes gigabytes. So when we incarnate, we lose all of our communicative ability. What's more, we start to lose our communicative ability with who and what we are. And therefore, we start to forget who and what we are, and we start to become associated with our incarnate vehicle. We start to think with the human body, or we start to think we're the grey body, or we start to think that we are the reptilian body, or we start to think that we are something else. Because we lose this memory of what we were. Also, we start to lose the ability to do what we used to be able to do. So at a lower frequency where we are now, we can't do things like telekinesis or telepathy or control our bodies, extend our life through pure willpower. But on these levels, they can. So on the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th levels, the higher up the frequencies you go, the more communicative bandwidth you gain back, the more knowledge about who and what you are, where you come from, comes back into play, and the functionality associated with being a higher frequency also comes back into play. So the ability to be able to extend your body life, so to speak, becomes more easier. The ability to communicate with other, so to say, entities that are of your genre, so to speak, is also easier as well. So as you look at the frequencies, the ability to be more, shall we say, metaphysical comes into being as well. Okay, next one. The third level is what I call the spiritual incarnate. And that's in the frequencies above the 7th. That's the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th. And although they're still associated with the physical universe, and we call them the higher spiritual levels, it's still incarnation, but you wouldn't think of it as being incarnation because it's so high frequency. Yeah, unless you're on those levels, you wouldn't understand. But if we compare it to where we are now, it's like us trying to communicate with the air, or one of the most rarest elements, gaseous elements that is within the atmosphere right now. There's just no way we could communicate with it, there's no way we can touch it, feel it or smell it. So these particular form factors are usually based in the higher frequencies or those locations within the physical universe that are better adapted for use of those entities who want to incarnate into a body type or vehicle that is of a higher frequency, such as nebulae, for instance, and above the nebulae. So if we think of the physical universe as these 12 frequencies, and we look through a telescope, almost a microscope then, but it's just the same. When we see the millions upon millions of galaxies, what else do we see in between? Emptiness, darkness, blackness. What holds it all together? Dark matter. That was good. Well done, that person. Scientists couldn't understand why the universe wasn't expanding. It's not supposed to expand, it was created. But what holds it all together is its structure. The fact that we haven't got the technology to be able to see what holds it all together means there must be something there. Scientists, in their infinite wisdom, created a wonderful saying, dark matter. They can't see it, they can't prove it. How can they use something that they can't prove when they always ask for physical evidence? So scientists tend to break their own rules to suit themselves. However, there is things in between the gaps in between the galaxies and in between the planetary systems, in between the planetary systems within the galaxies. It's called universal content. It's called other planets, other galaxies, other solar systems that are at a different frequential level, a higher level. So if you were to go to the 12th frequency level and use your telescope, you'd be lucky to find a dark area because it would be full of other planets, galaxies, solar systems at a different level. You'd see everything from the 12th frequency down to the 3rd frequency. And so there's no such thing as dark matter, there's just more content, just we can't see it. So the higher the frequency you go, you start to see more. You see more of what's going on, you see what's going on the Earth right now. There's an awful lot of activity, if you want to call it alien activity, you can do, or other incarnate activity where the body types of a higher frequency are existing here right now. We all occupy the same space. And we occupy the same space because they're a higher frequency. That's why a gas can exist in the same space as ice. And why, again, only gas exists in the same space as where we are right now. But at this level, they're almost not incarnate because they're so high a frequency. The fourth and final type of entity is outside of the structure of the physical universe. Okay, it's in the frequencies above it, so it's in the rest of the multiversal environment. They have a remarkable level of connectivity with their higher self, if you want to call that, their true and energetic self, what the Hindus call the Godhead, or the Oversoul. And they have advanced functions. They can create their own bodies, they can create by will, by thought. They don't need to have a body of any sort to be able to experience different things. So they can do anything they want to. They can create planets if they wanted to. And some of them do. Next one. Next one. Okay. I'm going too fast for your mic, sorry. Okay. So these energetic versions, they're energetic. It's not incarnation. So the fourth genre of alien isn't physical of any sort. It isn't gross physical, it isn't spiritual physical, it isn't spiritual itself. It's energetic. And that means it exists in the rest of the multiversal environment. From the 13th frequency upwards, the 13th frequency is the second universal environment. They don't incarnate, they don't need to incarnate. They've evolved to the point where they've progressed beyond the need to incarnate to be able to experience, learn, evolve and move forwards. All of these energy levels, these frequency levels, the 408 of them, okay, 396 of them above the 12th, creating the universe in their own right, are environments that they experience, learn and evolve in. Some of these environments are purely empty that they can use to work with. If we were to see them, these are the archetypical balls of energy that we see in digital cameras. These are the orbs. Okay. This fourth genre, being purely energetic, has full connectivity with itself, parts of itself it projects into other parts of the multiverse, and its own creator, its source, what we sometimes call God, but don't use that word. Okay? They create on a galactic level at times. They have complete control and ability to manipulate energy. And as I said before, they are evolved to the point where they don't need to incarnate. And so if they visit the lower frequency of the multiverse, sometimes the physical universe, they only stay for a short period of time. Content exists, by the way, I'll explain it later. So they have to protect themselves in some way. Which leads me quite nicely on to the next part of the presentation, okay, right? Which is about the vehicles that they use. Now, before we move on, just to refresh your memories, there's 4 different body types, so to speak, that I'm talking about. Gross physical, spiritual physical, which is just above the gross physical, and it's out of our visual range and tactile range and sensory range. But it's like the bit in between being sort of higher frequency and gross physical. And then we have the spiritual, which is still within the physical universe, but the higher end of the frequencies. And then we have the purely energetic, which is outside of the physical universe. This goes into different types of vehicle that they use, and how they might move around. Okay, next one. Thank you, Mike. Next one. Again, I've used some imagery here that I've taken off the internet to give you an idea of the thought process that might exist around some of the vehicles that they use. So in the first 3 gross physical frequencies, they use basic mechanical technology. That also includes electronics, by the way, and crystallonics and all those different things that we're starting to use right now. They're able to manipulate the local environment, either gravitationally or magnetically, to move around. Okay? And they can move themselves around by changing various different things in and around themselves. Okay, next. So they tend to move vast distances by changing their frequential location within the physical universe from a lower frequency to a higher frequency, move, and then come back into the lower frequency again. And they've got various different shapes and sizes and ways of doing it. But in essence, they would fold space, so to speak. Okay? They have the ability to change the distance from A to B to AB, and then B. So in essence, by moving from one frequency to the next, they can meet the start and end points, meet each other. And that's how they move around. And that's why sometimes the observations from people who've seen these things moving around is that all of a sudden it's gone from there to there, and they can't see it. Or it's changed direction, like that. There's no way you can change direction by doing that and doing that, with the usual sort of aeronautical aeroframes that we use now, even the most advanced ones. Because they're using different methods of moving around. Generally, it is gravitationally based, which is a higher technology we haven't even thought about yet, but electromagnetically as well. Sometimes they use rotating and non-rotating and pulsating magnetic generators, for example, to recreate this movement or this locally high frequency that attracts a locally low frequency in a higher frequency to move across. I want to call it creating a mini wormhole. You can do. Okay, next one. The next vehicle type can also be classified as a higher frequency mechanical vehicle, if you want to call it that. But these sort of span the whole the whole sort of frequential range of the rest of the physical universe. Okay? The gross physical is the first three frequencies. And then the rest of them, the spiritual and physical and the spiritual frequencies, they have a different type of vehicle, which is almost sort of, okay, it changes its way in which they work. It's depending on the frequency level, but it's generally the same sort of thing. In effect, it's a vehicle that uses various different forms of, if you want to call it sacred geometry, or in the history of God they describe it as starburst energy, which is using sort of cosmic energy that's created through things like solar flares and those sorts of things, or how a star would start to expand or contract, so to speak. Or even the free energy, prana, orgone, or cosmic energy that the source has that's naturally there. And they're able to use this again to move around at higher frequencies. But the thing is, when they move around higher frequencies, they have to create an energy field around themselves to help protect themselves, specifically in lower frequency environments. So, as with the mechanical ones, these use a similar method. They move from one point to another point by going to a higher frequency. Except these vehicles go to a much higher frequency than those vehicles that would be created in the first three gross physical levels would go to. Again, they're various different shapes and sizes. And they're surrounded by energy, specifically when they're seen in our particular environment. This energy is like a shield. Okay? How many of you go diving, or been diving, scuba diving? Yeah? Everyone's got, just one of you? 2, 3? Okay. What's the first thing you lose when you go scuba diving? Nerves. Nerves. Colour range in your sight. Okay? That's the first thing you lose. Second thing is the ability to move around quickly. Thirdly though, your hearing is enhanced because it's a denser environment and sound travels better through denser environments. So your hearing is enhanced, but your ability to move around is reduced and your vision is reduced. You can't speak, can you, generally? Unless you try and drown yourself in the water. So what they do is they surround themselves in an energy which maintains the frequential state that they exist within. We do the same thing. They maintain a higher frequency to come down to a lower frequency to exist here. They sometimes have suits that they use as well, and they glow. The spaceships or the craft they use glow. This glowing is a force field around them that maintains a higher frequency, so they can maintain their higher frequential functions and connectivity with those entities who are also with them, and of course their higher selves, so to speak, and not lose it. We also do it. We have submarines, don't we? Yeah. What's inside a submarine? Air. Is air a higher frequency than water? Yes, it is. So, air is a higher frequency environment, and we use this temporary higher frequency environment in a vehicle called a submarine to go deep into a lower frequency environment called water. They also need to do the same thing when they go through a higher frequency to traverse the frequencies to go to a different location in an instantaneous way. They still need to maintain their current frequency of domicile, irrespective of whether they go high or low frequentially. Because they get too high a frequency, they start to lose their grip on where they are. They start to become overloaded with communicative ability, with other sort of higher level metaphysical functions. So they have to stay sort of grounded at their frequential level. Okay? We do the same thing as well, don't we? Aeroplanes. What's inside airplanes? Air. But, as with the submarine, there's air, there's another component, pressure. So we maintain the air pressure in the plane and the submarine at the same as what it would be if it was at ground level. When we go down, we have to increase it a little bit to maintain the pressure to be able to breathe, because the lower down we go, we start to lose if you're diving, for instance, start to lose capacity in your lungs. Not so much in a submarine, but certainly when you're diving. When you're in an airplane, you lose the capacity to have the oxygen there. So you maintain oxygen levels, the partial pressure of things like nitrogen and oxygen and carbon dioxide are maintained, both in a submarine and in an airplane. That's why we don't pass out in airplanes. Rarefied atmosphere, you can't survive. Higher frequency, you can't work well, unless you've been existing there for a long time. Densified atmosphere, you get oxygen poisoning, for instance, or nitrogen narcosis. So we have to maintain a level of similarity with the environment that we're in. And these entities do exactly the same thing. With the energetic, they do a similar thing, but they do it by basically their will, their intention, their desire to create an environment temporarily by manipulation of energy around themselves that creates basically the same thing. They also create an ambient environment that is consistent with the frequential level, the universal level if you want to call it, that's where they come from. So again, this maintains their connectivity, their functionality, and their memory set of who and what they are, what they can do when they come down to lower frequencies. And in this instance, it's sometimes seen as a, if you want to change the slide line, in this instance, it's sometimes seen as a, sometimes seen as a ball. That's a particularly good image, actually. I like that. It's sort of similar to what you would see when you see an orb in a digital photography photograph. Sometimes these spheres appear and disappear. They move around. I've seen people's videos where they've had a stationary camera, a digital camera, and it's been moving on video. The things have been moving around, or suddenly disappearing and reappearing in different places. This is because they're moving around to experience different parts of this gross physical environment and protecting themselves. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sphere, by the way. It can be completely amorphous. It's just the way it is. Okay. So what we've talked about now, okay, next slide, before we go on to where they come from, is we've got gross physical entities, incarnate bodies, spiritual physical entities, incarnate bodies, and spiritual, being higher frequency but still within the physical universe, and energetic. And we've seen that they use very mechanical means to move around the universe, moving from frequency to frequency, move fast, of a lower frequency vehicle type or a higher frequency vehicle type, or it's purely energetic in terms of the way that they construct an energy field around themselves by their pure intention. Okay. So, I mean, this might seem common sense. We've talked about it all the way through the lecture, but where do they come from? Okay, next slide. So the first genre of the four basically comes from any part of the gross physical universe. Okay? Within our galaxy, our Milky Way, things like Arcturus, Sirius, Pleiades, etc., etc., etc. All these different areas, there's a possibility of a potential body type that we could incarnate into, and they come from all over the universe. The gross physical universe is occupied thoroughly at those frequency levels. So anything that's like got a solid body, like a planet or a nebulae, and anything in between that can be used is somewhere where some of these gross physical body types can originate from. Okay, next slide. The spiritual physical tend to be more in the what you would call nebulae-based environments or higher frequency environments that are part of the physical universe. They're in the 4th to the 7th frequency level. Totally invisible to the human eye, currently invisible to human technology, but at some point we will have the capability of extending the ability of our telescopes from well above the X-ray range into areas where they'll start to pick up some of these things that are happening around us right now, if you only tune your third eye into it, mechanically. So these spiritual physical body types, they exist in the frequency levels above where we are now, but still in fairly sort of let's say, physical environments. Next slide. The highest level associated with the physical universe is called the spiritual. And there's no other reason other than that. You could call it energetic if you wanted to, you could call it non-solid if you wanted to. It's just a very useful term to use at the moment. So there's no religious context associated with using the word spiritual. It's just a way of describing something which we haven't got a particular word to describe effectively yet. So again, these are what you would classify as being above the astral levels of the multiversal environment, and therefore still within the physical universe. Again, they're very invisible to the human eye. There's no way that our technology will be able to detect any of these particular environments right now. But it's still within the physical universe. So gross physical, spiritual physical, and spiritual entities, or beings incarnate, exist within the physical universe. That which we enjoy and love and work with right now. Next slide. The energetic is totally disincarnate, and therefore is outside of the physical universe. It's within the multiversal environment. And so their primary location can be anywhere. It can be, in the fifth full dimension, sixth full dimension. Some of the people I've interacted with on a consultational basis, I've met one or two people whose higher self or their Godhead exists within the ninth full dimension. And so these entities, although they don't need to incarnate, they sometimes come here to sort of help out. But the people, or the entities that usually come here to observe what's going on, who aren't incarnate, tend to be from the third to the fifth full dimension. And those entities also incarnate in the human form, again, tend to be in the third to the fifth full dimension. Very rarely in the sixth. Generally, it's a case of once we've got to the fifth full dimension from an evolution perspective, we start to decide or realise we don't need to incarnate to improve or accelerate our evolution progression. Okay. Right, next one. So just to remind you about a multiversal environment, these energetic entities exist in the multiverse, which is created through 12 full dimensions. 11 of those full dimensions, the second to the 12th, behave in the same way. They're split out into 3 subdimensions. Each of those subdimensions split out into 12 frequency levels or frequency bands. And each of those frequency bands create a universal environment in its own right. Okay? Static, simultaneous universal environment, not parallel. Parallel is something else. And I'll describe that after the break. Okay? The first full dimension houses all the lowest frequencies. And so although it splits out into 3 subdimensions, it compresses back into 1 subdimension, compressed subdimension, or composite subdimension. And that only allows 12 frequencies to be created. And all those 12 frequencies are required to create the physical universe. So we have 11 times 3 times 12 is 396 frequencies, plus 1 times 3 is 1, times 12 is 12, which gives us 408 frequencies, but only 396 plus 1 universes. So where we are now is in the lowest of the frequencies in a particular multiversal environment that is within our Creator. Okay. So we have 3 conditions here. 4 different types of alien body, if you want to call it that. 3 different types of vehicle that they use. 2 of them are sort of mechanical, 1 of them is purely energetic, and there's basically 3 locations that they come from. The gross physical aspect of the physical universe, the spiritual physical and the spiritual, and then outside of the physical universe and the rest of the multiversal environment. Okay. Next one. This is the fun bit. During some of the work I've done over the years, I've interacted with a number of individuals, and I was communicating with somebody in Australia back in 2012, and he asked a question, and I had to sort of meditate on it and link in with this person to find out what's going on. And as a result of that, I found out a series of information about, or some reasons or some examples of why we experience abductions. Okay. The first way was the abduction based upon a pre-incarnate agreement to act as a metric, basically. So some of us have some form of mechanical or electromechanical or higher frequency, but still physical, implants within us that's allowing other entities that are incarnate around the physical universe to monitor how the human form is doing, depending upon the environment that we're in. They're also used for sometimes giving us ideas about different technological opportunities, such as things like television, for instance, display technologies. And look at how far mobile phones have changed in the last 10 to 15 years. Yeah? It's taken us a couple of thousand years to go from bearskins and chewing gum to be able to invent the wheel. And all of a sudden we've got computers in the palms of our hands. It's come from somewhere. And sometimes these implants that we agree to have as a result of our incarnate function is to be able to work with other entities who are incarnate to help us progress, so to speak, by receiving information electronically or telepathically through these implants. But they're also monitoring our free will. The Earth is a fairly rare environment. It's the only location, the only environment within the whole of the physical universe where individualised free will is allowed to be operating, to be operable. Every other entity that incarnates has a form of collective consciousness. And even if they have individualised free will, they only have this individualised free will in the context of it working for the benefit of the collective. Not like mankind, who's able to create all sorts of nonsense by having their own individualised free will. Okay. We can create wars on our own. We've got the will to do that, but these entities don't. We sometimes get worried or scared or upset about, people being taken on craft, monitored, and being dumped miles down the road. Even chronologically, it can be days that have passed, and they lose all sort of recognition of where they've come from, where they're going to. But why should we be afraid of it if we've agreed to it prior to our this particular incarnation? We shouldn't. Well, we do it, don't we? We take animals out of the wild, we poke and prod them, take blood samples, sometimes give them inoculations, take temperature, sometimes put GPS trackers on them, and let them back out into the wild again. And then we track them down for next time. We do exactly the same thing, it's just that we don't recognise it. So, whereas, these animals don't have much of a say in terms of them being tracked and monitored, we've agreed it prior to incarnation. It's just that we forget about it as a result of cutting down the frequencies. So that's another reason why there's some abductions that take place where there's specifically intrusive analysis that happens. Is because we've agreed to it, and it's all part of understanding how this particular body is working with environmental changes and technological changes. One of those technological changes is the dramatic increase in wireless communications. We're surrounded, all of us now, 60 of us here, if your phone's on, even though it might be on silent, think of all the microwave radiation that's flying around. Wouldn't you like to know how your body's working with it? It's breaking down, dying, giving you brain tumours and stuff. This is what they're doing. They're understanding how we work with higher technology. Okay, next one. This next one's interesting because, in essence, we can have an incarnation within an incarnation. So we can incarnate into a higher frequency body, and then because it's a higher frequency, we have higher frequency functions, higher metaphysical functions. We can detach our sentience and the energy associated with that sentience that's driving or animating a body type or a form factor, and allow a large chunk of it to animate another body, such as the human body. And so sometimes this other body is either in stasis or is still interacting with those other incarnate entities in the frequency that of its domicile. And so the sentience that's in the lower frequency body is passing information on about the environment and how that particular entities in this particular body type is interacting with other entities that are incarnate at this frequency level, and how it's coping with the environmental changes. It's feeding the information back. And sometimes they have to check and make sure that there's no damage being done, so to speak, to the energy and the sentience associated with this sort of secondary incarnation and how it would affect the primary incarnation. And sometimes, again, the whole body has to be taken to a higher frequency level to be monitored. And sometimes it has to happen to allow part of the sentience to go back into the primary incarnate body. Okay. So sometimes we still incarnate ourselves, but it's us ourselves who are being part of the abduction, so to speak, to allow part of ourselves to experience both a higher and a lower frequency environment. Okay, next one. So this second version is really about us using ourselves to experience a lower environment for educational purposes sometimes, to experience how memory loss happens, how to regain memory loss through working on ourselves through things like meditative techniques to increase our frequencies, sometimes things like yoga, pranayama, to create a condition where we can increase our frequencies and regain communication with our primary incarnate self. Dolores Cannon, in one of her books, I can't remember which one it is, stumbled across a client who had just the same thing, who had exactly the same thing. She was talking to the, shall we say, she called it the subconscious or the oversoul of this particular individual. And all of a sudden it wasn't the individual, but it was. And she started to communicate with what ended up being the primary incarnation of this person, who was the secondary incarnation. And they had a dialogue about, you know, if this part of me understood what the other part of me is doing, it wouldn't believe it, etc., etc., etc. And it's all to do with understanding the environment. It's like increasing your ability to experience, learn and evolve whilst being incarnate in a physical universe, but splitting yourself into two different body types to experience a low frequency environment and a high frequency environment. And maybe using it to progress themselves, or using it as an opportunity to give people ideas about different technologies, different ways of understanding things, planting ideas into people like Logie Baird or Edison. Yeah? People who had technology that was no better than cast iron, and pieces of string that create light bulbs, and radio transmitters and receivers, and television. It's also understanding how individualised free will works at this level as well. So you can experience higher frequency existence and connectivity and ability and functionality, but without the freedom of individualised free will. And at the same time, you can experience a low frequency environment where you lose all that functionality. You're basically deaf, dumb and blind with your five senses, but you can experience free will. And so it's a bit of an experiment. So it allows that particular aspect of a soul to understand and maximise its opportunity for evolution progression. Okay. So, just to summarise. In reality, aliens are just simply body types. They're incarnate entities, just as we are. They incarnate to experience, learn and evolve, just like us. They have the same souls, okay? Or higher selves, or true energetic souls, or Godheads, just like us. They incarnate in all the frequencies and locations of the physical universe, just like us. And they can also be purely energetic, not incarnate, just as we are sometimes. So what are aliens? Sometimes they're us. Okay, thank you. I'll let you go on to the thank you slide now. I think that's some questions if they want to. Okay. So any questions on that? Any questions? It's a bit deep, isn't it, really? Because it's not sort of, I don't think it's what you expected.
Yes, very interesting. I would like to correct you about something. The so-called 11 dimensions of space-time comes from Hugh Everett, not from Stephen Hawking. And Hugh Everett was Stephen Hawking's student. And really, it's allied to string theory. The 11 dimensions is the concept of string theory. It became 12 about 5 years ago. But it's still allied to string theory.
What is string theory?
That's a very good question.
It's a theory.
I've got time to go into that.
Yeah, it's a theory. There's nothing to substantiate it.
Exactly what you're doing now.
Yeah.
It's a theory.
Yeah.
And you have no evidence. But it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, the thing with metaphysical and spiritual things is there is nothing physical to plant your evidence on. As scientific an engineer, right, I like to work on evidence. My poor partner over there knows this a few times. Okay? In essence, what we can't see, touch and taste, we don't believe in. But I want to give you an example, sir, of what belief and understanding is. If somebody said to you, if I push that switch over there, that light comes on, and you've not seen it before, and you've not done it before, would you believe them? You might do, you might not. But you wouldn't really know, would you? Because you haven't experienced it yourself. It's only when you see them do it, you think, ah, right, that's real. They push that button, the light comes on. Maybe there's more than just me having to believe him based upon his experience, because I've seen it now. It's only when you do it yourself, you push the button, and the light comes on, do you move away from begrudging belief to possible understanding, to academic understanding, to actual experiential knowledge. People,
that applies to everything.
It does. And this is the difference between people who are not able to communicate with other entities through telepathy versus the people who can. Because we can't experience it ourselves, we tend to disbelieve it. Because we haven't got evidence ourselves. We'll go further than that. Depth of knowledge. We know we push the button on the wall, the light comes on. But what causes it? Unless we understand that there's a wire between the switch and the light, we don't understand the link between the switch and the light. What caused... Okay, it's just a wire. What does that do? Oh, there's electricity there. What's electricity? Oh, it's a something. It's created. Where does it come from? Ah, there's a fuse box in the corner consuming it. Okay, so something in that consuming it over there has something called electricity, which passes through the wires to that switch, which creates a circuit, you would think, and then light comes on. So now you're starting to understand more depth of detail of understanding, because you're having it explained to you, and you can see it work. Further depth of understanding. Where does the electricity come? How does it get into that fuse box? Ah, right, there's a national grid outside. What's that? Big wires, big voltage, big amps, and some big watts as well. Right, okay. So you start to understand there's a big national grid of electrical network that's out there. It's providing all the electricity that goes to our fuse box over there, eventually goes to our switch, and powers the light bulb. So you start to get more depth of knowledge. Eventually you go into how electricity is generated and how the magnetics rotating about each other create electrical impulse and direction and incentive. And therefore you start to understand why electricity is created. It's only when we've created... Basically, one of my things I had to do as an engineer was to make my own motor, wind my own windings, so I could understand how rotating an armature around a static magnetic field could create electricity. It's only when you do it yourself that you fully understand what is happening. Until you do it yourself, or you experience it yourself, It's simply a belief system which you may choose to disbelieve or believe. So until we know, theory is simply a theory, only for those who don't experience it firsthand.
Yeah, obviously there's much about the universe we don't understand. We're just at the beginnings of a century in which we will know 10 times more 100 years from now, because it's exponential, than we know now. Everybody understands that. But you do have another problem. You talked about free will. I'd like you to look up New Scientist on your computer and see what it has to say currently about free will. We don't have free will.
That's true to a certain level. We have a certain level of free will based upon an overall plan. And that's something else we can talk about. There's a whole, there's lectures within lectures within lectures within lectures that can fractionalise out from all of this stuff. It's a massive subject, and we don't know 1/1,000,000th of a thousandth of a thousandth of a thousandth of 1% of what's out there. Thank you.
Okay. Are you aware of the 1977 ET broadcast from the Hamilton transmitter at Newbury? Sorry, yeah, what Newbury?
No.
Okay, well, it might be worth looking it up.
Okay.
There are transcripts on the internet. The 6 o'clock news was broken into for a period of 5 minutes, and I think it was November '77. The transcript was fed with 2 separate power supplies and 2 separate cable feeds. It was broken into. There was actually a video broadcast over, and it was reported again on the 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock news. You know, so this is actually on record. But the comments passed in that broadcast were quite pertinent to dimensions, and actually Ian's said we need new dimensions now, so that might be something you would be interested in, or other be interested in.
Yeah. I mean, both of those pieces of information, the location of the information, are useful. And I used to read New Scientist a lot, and then I found out that even New Scientist was contrived. Yeah. So we have to be careful where we get the information from. And actually, you know, it may sound like I'm being arrogant in terms of the delivery of my information, but I don't know that much. I don't even know fractions and fractions and fractions of this much. And what I know now may change. Because as we get exposed to more information, we become more expansive, we're capable of understanding more. It's a bit like when you're at junior school, you start to learn your times table. It's only through the understanding of addition and subtraction, multiplication and division, that you're able to move on to fractions and quadratic equations and matrix multiplication, and then tile mathematics and other advanced forms of mathematics. We're only as good as our last piece of information, and sometimes that last piece of information is over there, where we should be going that way. But we're allowed to do that because actually, even though it's only sort of that much different, that much distance in terms of our knowledge base, where it could have been that much distance in terms of growth is better than nothing at all. So we're allowed to go slightly off centre sometimes in our understanding of what we're experiencing and how we relate to it and how we broadcast it and explain and educate others, because we know at some point we'll start to understand a deeper level of understanding based upon understanding our mistakes. Okay.
Yeah, with this theory now, how does it affect the fact that when we were first put on this earth, intelligence was virtually nil? And what will happen in 1,000 years' time when intelligence is going to be absolutely vast? How does it fit in with what you're saying?
We may go backwards, yes. The way we're going at the moment, we could go dramatically backwards. Because if you look at the second lecture, provided you wish to have experience it, is all about different realities and things. And where we are right now shouldn't, in terms of what's going on in the world, shouldn't really be happening. If you think about where we were about 10 years ago compared to where we are now, it's like we've done that. You know, so what happened there? You know, the whole political world's like a Muppet show. So right now we're in a strange place where we could correct ourselves and have an extremely high level of intelligence and understanding, and the human form from Earth may be spread all over the a certain sector of the physical universe. We may not be. We may be back in the caves. You know, it just depends. But one thing is for sure, growth is logarithmic. It grows very slowly. And then all of a sudden, things go fast. But at this point where things go fast, it can go down as well. You know, technology and knowledge are a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. So, yeah, we could go up, we could get down.
What are your thoughts on a court UFO and back engineering?
I think it's entirely possible, provided we've got the base technology to be able to understand what we're seeing. If we were presented with this computer, for instance, 50 years ago, we wouldn't be able to reverse engineer it, because a lot of the technology is chip on glass. You know, where's the transistors? Where's the valves? But it's a different level of technology. Things which are incorporated, which are nested within each other, which are embedded within each other. If we have the understanding of what that might be, then we can reverse engineer it. But if we haven't got that base level of education and technology, we won't be able to do it. It'll just be like a piece of something to us, metal or glass.
Excuse me, do inventors get their ideas from aliens?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes if they have an implant within them that can be used as a communicative medium, they can get information, yes.
Have early science fiction writers been inspired by aliens?
There's a number of...
Like H.G. Wells and Jules Verne.
Yeah. Why do you think we suddenly went into a lot of science fiction-based movies in the 1970s? You know, Star Wars came out very quickly, Aliens came out very quickly. Star Trek before then, you know, all of these things are implants in Gene Roddenberry. Have you read the book by Phyllis Schlemmer? Yeah? The Only Planet of Choice. That's an excellent book. Gene Roddenberry, sorry, and a number of others used to visit Phyllis Schlemmer, who was a channel. And she channeled information from other incarnate entities that were alien entities and picked up information, and also energetic entities. And so Gene got the idea about Star Trek from that. And there's other things as well. I mean, telephone displays. Where's that come from? That's definitely alien technology.
I think it's in a Victorian era, so they wouldn't have any ideas of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no basis for their quantum leap in knowledge, is there? We look at Logie Baird, yeah? Television screen. Where did that come from? You know, what he got was basically bear skins and chewing gum technology. It's just these things are given to us in various different ways. Whether we incarnate with the energy in us, or you're in us, or whether we're given it in different ways. Yeah. Please down there.
What's your views on so-called Illuminati, and would you say they like an alien connection?
The Illuminati exist, full stop. They do exist.
You're so full of confidence. I admire the confidence, I really do.
Yeah, I've had interactions with them, unfortunately. Basically, they are individuals who they understand various different things about how to work with energies. They're not particularly, what's the word for it? Not particularly doing things in the benefit of mankind, although they think they are. But basically, they use higher frequency functionality, so to speak, in a low frequency way. Yeah, and they are trying to. But the reason for them being there is to provide a choice. The physical universe is all about duality. You know, this choice versus that choice. Yeah, take the good path versus the bad path, the high road versus the low road. And so basically, they're there to provide us with choices to make as to whether we choose the best route and evolve by understanding the best route, or whether we gain, shall we say, low frequency thoughts, behaviours and actions, which bring us down the frequency and make us addicted to being here.
Who are they?
Who are they?
Yeah, who are they?
They're human beings.
Yeah, but who?
Exactly.
Dick Cheney. He's probably. That's a joke.
There is nobody physically, other than maybe the I've forgotten the name of that family. Rockefeller, that Rothschild?
Rothschild.
The Rothschilds are the most visible aspect of the Illuminati. There's others as well.
Yeah.
It's got to be big, isn't it?
Sorry?
The Majestic 12. People who were put in place to
Yeah.
look out for.
Yeah. There's a country within a country, and it's like about 2 blocks of a street somewhere, where it's got country status and it contains a number of individuals who have most of the wealth of the earth.
Information and
Yeah.
they just keep it all from us. That's the fact.
Sorry, I can't hear you saying.
So they've been given a lot of information from connections with higher beings, as you were calling them.
Yeah.
And it's been kept quiet from us all.
Mm. Maybe they think that superiority is better than dissemination of the information.
And maybe it's very dangerous information.
Could well be. Yeah.
It's dangerous to have really dangerous information. They're afraid of
Yeah.
that.
One thing's for sure. The human race as it is now is not mature enough to be able to control some of the powers and energies that could be available to us, provided we were mature.
Tesla, he was out there with all this.
He was. Tesla do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, do an awful lot, yeah. Gentleman there.
There's 3 levels to the Illuminati. There's the dark, the light, and the neutral. So that's 3 lowest. There's the enlightened one.
Mm.
Right. So there's the dodgy ones, and there's the good. So there's the neutral.
Enlightened means just need to know more. But really, the word enlightened can be misinterpreted as to being somebody who is of a higher knowledge and therefore good. That sort of enlightenment should be aligned to self-realisation, where you know really who and what you are, and you're able to communicate with others of that level, and whether they're incarnate or disincarnate. Whereas enlightenment in the Illuminati sense is simply knowing more than somebody else.
But there's 3 sides to them, though. There's a side that do it for this. There's 2 types of people on the planet: service to self,
Yeah.
or service to others. But the Illuminati are on 3. There's neutral that do it. This is scientific, and there's one that do it for their own means, and there's one that
Yeah.
Illuminati that do it to help mankind.
Yeah.
There's a trinity.
Yeah, and I understand there's different levels of them, but there's an awful lot that don't do it for the benefit of mankind. They do it for the benefit of themselves. Yeah. And it's those ones, that particular genre, that have the particular bad press, so to speak.
Next one.
One more, Doll.
I just wanted to ask something. You know, you're talking about wolves. Like some people say they see it in photos. I see quite a lot, but I don't know if they're orbs. So it's like loads and loads of circles. They've got like bubbles that float in.
Yeah.
But there's like loads of them.
When you disfocus your eyes?
Sorry?
When you disfocus your eyes?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
you know,
There's-
so I don't really know what they are, but
Yeah.
they like float in
Yeah.
loads of bubbles.
Yeah, there's two explanations for that. One, they're floaters,
Right.
which is a known physiological condition with people's eyes.
Okay.
2, if you disfocus your eyes, you can see something called free energy, which is called orgone, which is like little worm, it goes everywhere in your vision.
Right.
So if it's like little circles that float across your eyes, they're floaters. If it's like little black worms that sort of flash and disappear, that's classified as free energy or unbound.
No, because I asked Fortune Teller one, and I said, oh, I think she said they found bubbles and built it, and I said, yeah, she knows they're old. That's what she told me, so I was not sure.
I think she was misunderstanding what you were describing. Yeah. My big toe, yeah. If you read Tom's books, and I've had quite a lot of communication with Tom over the past couple of years, and his understanding of the greater reality, as I like to call it, is a different way of understanding it. And so you can think, sometimes you can think of the multiverse or the environment that we're in as a computer program, as Tom thinks, or it could be a matrix, for instance, or it could be a different way of understanding, or even my understanding. The thing is that all of these different ways of understanding the bigger picture are simply small parts of that bigger picture. We have to take on board everything, from the idea that the multiverse is part of a matrix, to part of a computer program, it's all a simulation, to what Tom talks about, to what Dolores talks about, to how I understand it. Everything fits, just look for the commonalities. What works with you, might not work with somebody else. So although some of the things I say might ring true, some of the things might not quite ring true with you in terms of your level of understanding. Because just as we at school had different ways of learning, different teachers could teach us where other teachers couldn't teach us because of the way they taught. And by the way, that's understood now, so the different modalities of teaching at school, and the children have got a better chance of understanding now. Whereas when I was at school, if you didn't slot into a certain format of being taught, you didn't get taught. They just ignored you. Now everybody can start to understand. So take everybody's piece of information as a little piece of the jigsaw puzzle and add it all together and look for the bits of commonality between them. Okay. This presentation, by the way, is called The Road to Sentience and the Greater Reality. But because of the time constraints we've got now, and because of the link in with the first presentation, I've decided to cut in halfway through. Okay? So this bit is a bit about the greater reality, so to speak. Now I've started it on this particularly evocative slide. Time doesn't exist. Okay? What's the fourth dimension? All you scientists out there? Time, yeah. Spiritualists say time doesn't exist, and we all agreed. But how can the fourth dimension be time if it doesn't exist? We're supposed to be ascending into the fifth dimension. Well, how do we go from the third dimension to the fifth dimension? We can't. What? How can you go from one dimension to another if the one in the middle doesn't exist? It's nonsense. So this starts to tell you that the information that we've got, although some of it is right, there's an awful lot of misunderstanding about it. And that misunderstanding is based upon the information that we're given to us and how we're able to assimilate it and re-understand it and therefore present it back to other individuals. Sometimes we get it wrong, sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we get it spot on, sometimes we're completely inaccurate. But when you look at the total set of information that's out there, you can start to see where, that's the sky, that's the river down there, that's a building over there. You can start to see the big picture start to evolve. So take everything on board that you see, you hear, and just take and then just look at the bits that are common. Start to see where sometimes there's the personality of the author involved. Sometimes there's a bit of creation involved. Sometimes there's true information. Sometimes there's information that's too bizarre to believe. So leave that for a bit. So that's the way to think about all these different things. What happens out there in the greater reality is far too big for any of us to understand collectively whilst we incarnate, let alone individually. Okay? None of us will be able to can truly understand how our cars work, let alone how to drive them properly at times. Okay, so just think of it in these sort of ways. Take the bits and pieces, take them in bite-sized chunks or baby-sized bites. What works? Okay, that works for me. That doesn't work for me. Why doesn't it work for me? My educational process. Some things that people understand as scientists don't understand as an artist. Some people think that some things that we understand as a generalist, we don't understand as a specialist. So just think of it in terms of, just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's not real. It means that we don't have the educational skill set to be able to go into that place where we expand it further. And everybody's involved with this. You know? There's people out there who know knowledge that I can't get my head around. And there's people out there who are going to take this information even further. So just think of it in those terms. Back to time though. If time doesn't exist, what does exist? Well, during the first channeled works that created the first few pages in the History of God book, I happened upon a particular entity that eventually called itself Byron, and it described what we do exist within. We don't exist in time because time doesn't exist. Time is a metric that's been invented by mankind to describe something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the universe or the multiverse. There are texts out there where people have been in communication with other higher frequency incarnate entities or alien entities who've said that mankind is the only incarnate or the only civilization in the whole of the physical universe that's created a metric for something that doesn't exist. Every other so-called advanced or technologically advanced civilization out there understands that time doesn't exist. This is why they can do what they do. We limit ourselves. We think we've got it. Mankind's got an ego the size of a planet, and it's not ashamed of it. And as a result of that, it holds us back. I was amazed when this information came through, and the description is actually quite interesting. Next slide. I was told to say that we exist in a series of event spaces. Everything exists in events. Think about it. Everything we've done throughout our life is a series of events, of direct or indirect events, or series of events as like an event stream. Sometimes they have a start, sometimes they have an end, sometimes they keep going. If everything exists in the same space, how do we explain it? And the one illustration I was given is a rubber band ball. Okay? A rubber band ball is a series of rubber bands all in the same space. But if you think about it, all those rubber bands are connected to each other, aren't they? Each rubber band is in contact with each other rubber band, either directly or indirectly through contact with another. So if each rubber band is an event, or a space that holds an event, or a series of events, and that event is in contact with every other event in the same space, then the concept of time cannot exist, because it doesn't exist. But we can move from one event to another event. And that's how certain individuals, through their use of whatever means they are, they're born with specific functions or powers, or they're taught through different meditative training, can project their consciousness, so to speak, into various different events. Call it future seeing or past seeing, those sorts of things. And sometimes there's been examples of areas where somebody's moved into an area of locally high frequency that's in contact with another area of a higher frequency that's locally low. And they suddenly move from one environment into another environment temporarily. There's a wonderful book, I can't remember the lady's name now, called Twidders. And she describes a number of events where people have suddenly found themselves in the 19th century, or in the middle of a field in the States, when they're in downtown Chicago. You know? And they're seeing this group of Red Indians on a hill. Then all of a sudden they're back in downtown Chicago. It's because everything exists in the same space. There's no past, present or future, there's only now. Fortunately, at our frequential level, we see things in a linear way. The interesting thing is, though, event space, as I'm told to call it, this thing which is what we really exist within, has a number of different types and descriptions. Next. So we're going to go through a number of different event spaces and the things that are created through these different event spaces. If you want to call it localised pockets of time, then you can do. But think of it in terms of events. Think of the things that have happened to you throughout your life. It's been a series of events. Things that have happened to you. Okay? You've changed jobs, you've moved house, you've got married. There are things that happen around those events. Okay, so. But an event space can be defined basically in this way. It's an area of space within a larger entity that's called the origin, that holds, which is where our creator exists within, that has its own level of functionality above and beyond that which it is. So it's space within the origin and within the source and within us that has a function of creating a parallel condition. It allows us to be parallelized, duplicated, fractalized. If we go down the road and meet a T-junction, you think, ah, maybe if I go that way, I'll go and see John down the road in the cafe. But I've also promised to go and see David later on. Which way should I go first? Let's go and see David. So you walk to the left. Part of you went to the right as well, because you had a choice to make. And so although you feel that you made the decision, and you've gone that way, there's another space that's been created from that decision that shows the opposite route. And so a parallel condition is created. So an event space is a function of our environment, our overall environment, that parallelizes itself when there's a potential or an opportunity for a choice is there to be made. Next slide. Have you ever noticed how sometimes one event starts and one event finishes? Or there's a gap in between events. And it's like nothingness in terms of your existence means nothing as such. It's on tick over. This is basically because there's a non-linear interaction between one event space and another. You're in between events. You're existing, you're doing things, but that in itself is an event. It's a neutral event, so to speak. This allows you to move from one event to another, which sometimes we do seamlessly through a series of events called event stream, which I'll describe later, but sometimes it allows us to observe the start of an event, for instance. The start of an event is an event space can allow any change to have its own start of an event, even when there appears to be no real start. Have any of you noticed when something suddenly happens? You think, how did I get here? How did this happen? Yeah? How did President Trump suddenly get promoted to president? Everything happened in a really bizarre way, didn't it? Next slide. The reciprocal of the start of the event is the end of the event. But an event space can allow any changes to have its own end of event, even when there appears to be no real end. And so, all of a sudden, that which we're doing can suddenly finish. And we can either move into another event, or we can end up being in this neutral spot, where we're sort of just ticking over, doing something. An event stream is basically the expected direction of a series of natural events take within an event space. If you like, it's like going to see a medium and you say, what am I going to be doing in 5 years? And if you're lucky, they'll look at you and they'll go, okay, let's have a look at where your future lines are. And you're going that way, that way, that way, that way. Based upon everything that's happening now, you'll end up being in Australia as an engineer or something. Because the event stream, the major event stream, is going in one direction. Maybe slightly across, probably. But things sometimes happen that knocks that event stream off course. We get distracted at times. Maybe we find something we want to do instead. So we go that way rather than that way. Or that way rather than that way. And so we start to create parallel versions of ourselves, fractalised, rather like the way a branch of an oak tree starts to split out. You know? The trunk of an oak is quite large, and those branches come off, and then those branches fractalise. Think of it in terms of the trunk of the oak as being the mainstream event, the main stream of events in an event space, or the joining of event spaces together. And the trunk has these branches that come off, and these are the different choices we make. Okay? The roots of the oak tree, which are just as big or just as far-seeking underground as the branches are in the air, are like when these different event spaces we go into start to reach what I'm told to call an evolutionary dead end, and they start to re-collapse back into the nearest mainstream series of events. So they come back into itself, and eventually come back into the mainstream, which is the trunk of the oak tree. So the event stream is this expected direction, based upon a number of expected decisions that we make. Whereas the event space horizon, which is interesting, this is a play on words really, because event space horizon is event spaces that appear to be white horizon and a white background. And what does that mean? An event space horizon is where all events that could possibly happen, or the possibility of possible possibilities, which have possibilities within themselves, are all happening concurrently. I think it was Beyond the Source Book 2, I was in contact with another entity, by the 12th source entity. And it was showing me how one can experience all events concurrently. And I couldn't do it. Basically, it just went tilt. Because it was showing me all the different events that could happen with me, one after another, faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, until it became so fast, I couldn't assimilate it. And it was like I was surrounded by this completely white sphere. And that, it told me, is when every event is happening concurrently. One cannot understand this or assimilate it when one is incarnate. When we are disincarnate, we have a higher level of functionality, and we have a higher level of communicative ability, and we're able to access everything in an omnipresent, omniscient sort of way, then we'll be able to experience all events concurrently. Because that's what our higher self does anyway. But right now we can't do it. If we could, it's like exposing ourselves to everything that everybody on the earth has ever thought of doing, has done, will do, may do, all concurrently. That's also including all the past, present, and future connotations. Next slide. An event stream bubble is an interesting function within this so-called non-time. Okay. Don't think of space-time. Space-time is a human invention. It doesn't exist as such, in my understanding. Okay. So each event is a bubble of interaction between an entity or being and the environment it's working within. So right now we've got an event stream bubble that we're all experiencing together. It's like a shared reality, so to speak. We all want to experience something. In this instance, it's me talking about a particular subject which I like and have a level of understanding of, will be very, 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 very small. Because it's interesting and it helps educate us all. Outside, other people are experiencing other types of event stream bubble. They're watching football, for instance, or they're down in the pub, or they're at home watching television. Or the other side of the world, they may be going and watching football, or playing hockey, or riding a bicycle, or working. It's something where we always, where we can work together. A micro event space is a very small event space that's specific to the needs of one particular entity, being or environment. So a micro event space might be, you might decide to go to the bathroom, as an example, as an event. Okay? That's a micro event space. Everything else disappears. I'll make a beeline to the bathroom, do what I have to do, come back. That's the start and the end of the micro-event space. The event is me going to and from the bathroom. And that can happen on an individual basis or even an environmental basis. But all of these different things, these different spaces, are created by us. Not just on Earth, but on all the other planets and all the other frequencies within the physical universe. And outside in the rest of the multiversal environment. So event spaces create parallel conditions. Next slide. So a parallel condition is the duplication of event space. It's the creation or generation of a new but similar event space where a choice can be made. And that choice can also be the potential of a choice. Or the potential, or the potential possibility, etc., etc., etc. Next slide. Okay. So in reality, it's possible that we have a number of things which we could choose to do, but don't do. So that choice or the possibility of the choice, the possible possibility of that choice results in a large enough downstream differential to create a new series of experiences that are self-contained and independent of the event space or reality that they create. So what is this reality? What is a reality and what are the different types of reality? Hands up who thinks we've changed realities recently. Yeah? We have. I believe we've moved realities. We've gone from one particular reality to another. One where we've shown how ridiculous we can allow things to get within the world. So let's define what a reality is. Next slide. This is a bit sort of high level, but basically an environmental or interactive condition that creates this desired function of the event space or event stream. Basically, it's created by us. It's a perception-based condition. It's what we believe. Sometimes based upon the experiential knowledge, is what is happening around us. Okay? So this is a reality. Right now we're experiencing a reality within an event space. Okay? We're all together in the same space. And this reality, what we're experiencing now, this belief, disbelief, shock, horror, concern, misunderstanding, understanding, is what we're collectively experiencing in this particular reality. Next slide. You'd like to think that an alternative reality is something that we all understand. But basically, alternative realities, again, is similar to what a reality is. It's a personal or group-based perception. How many of you choose to move away from individuals who don't have the same level of understanding or interest in the same subject matter as yourself? Yeah, I do. Yeah. I move away from people who don't understand. Because I know that if I try to explain what I know, what I experientially know, like the light switch, and the depth behind it, that if they don't understand, there's no point in trying to explain it to them. Because they understand things in a different way. And maybe my knowledge is too low for them, or too high for them, or too abstract, or too complicated, or too weak, or too strong. So an alternative reality or desire for a certain experiential environment with a known environmental relative to their thoughts, behaviours and actions. And it's the desire to ignore that which one doesn't desire to interact with. Yeah? How many people here have walked out of a lecture here? You can own up if you want to. Yeah? I've had people walk out of lectures. I've had a number of people walk out of lectures. We've all had it. We've all had people, if we're standing up here talking about a subject, yeah, those of us who've done that have all had somebody argue against it or offer a reasonable judgment against it. That is basically saying this isn't my reality. I'm not interested in that reality. It doesn't fit in with my overall understanding or perception. So birds of a feather flock together. Think of the people who get involved in problems of football matches. They all group together and have one group of supporters have a fight against another group of supporters. Yeah? Their reality is their group, their football team. The other reality is their football team. The two don't mix, do they? So they end up having a fight. Same sort of thing. So the overall reality is the experiential conditions created by the existence of the sentience that is the origin. So there is this vastness of reality which we don't understand. None of us understand it. We just think we do. In our limited, very small human condition. All we understand is that we can reproduce, we can get jobs, we might be able to think, maybe able to create, maybe able to buy a better house or a better car, and sometime the body will die. It's basically our reality here. But the bigger reality is that we're part of something much bigger, which is part of something bigger. Okay. The multiversal reality is like a condition within that. It's the experiential condition that's created by the governing entities responsible for a specific multiversal environment within a specific source entity. There's more than one creator that is within this overall sentient energy that's called the origin. My current understanding is that there's 12, which is a function of structure, I'm told. But basically, multiversal realities are created by the creator of that multiverse. It's a general condition. It is, this is what the structure of the multiverse is, this is what its properties are, this is what its reason to be is, this is how you can use it. Yeah? Look at a bathroom. You go into the bathroom, you know you go in there to take a wash, a shower, or relieve yourself. That's a function, that's a reality. That's a localised reality of what a bathroom is. Ooh, we've moved on 2 slides. You can go to 2 slides, haven't you?
2 slides back.
There's 2 slides forward now. So
Forward.
there's the overall reality. Next one. So universal reality is a smaller representation, basically, of the multiversal reality, in so much that it starts out to be that when a multiverse and its universal components are first introduced as a medium for evolution and progression. So basically, a universal reality is again all-encompassing within a certain constrained environment, a universe, and it stays that way. But it can change. If all of the different entities or beings within the universe want to change the reality of the universe, they will do. Right now, we don't know what that universal reality is. We don't have the ability to comprehend it. Others do, different frequencies, some of these aliens that we've been talking about, different genres of aliens. Even though they're incarnate, because they're a higher frequency, they will understand more of the universal reality that we do. We think we do, because we think we can work with it without mathematics. But the number of individuals, theoretical physicists, who are now saying, actually, we've got this wrong, or this is not quite right, or we'd like to retrace our steps and go over here, is interesting. We talk about superstring theory. It might just well be a super banana. It means nothing until we absolutely understand it. But right now, our universal reality within the Earth-based environment is based upon a very embryonic level of understanding. Global reality is a sort of further dissection of it. It's a further dissection of the overall theme of reality. It's really relevant to an area within the universal reality that affects a large but not significant number of entities or beings within that universal environment. So it could affect a number of galaxies, or a galaxy, for example, or a group of galaxies. So that local environment of a bunch of galaxies within the universe, within a certain frequential range, might have a reality. It could be that these entities work with each other and they're totally ignorant of other entities in the rest of the universe. So their reality doesn't include them. Our reality at one point suggested that we had a flat Earth. Poor old Galileo was almost burnt at the stake for suggesting that we went around the sun. Yeah? Our reality is based upon our knowledge base as well, and what we're prepared to accept and work with. Realising that, in general, today's metaphysics is tomorrow's physics. Today's witchcraft is tomorrow's hard science. We have to understand these little realities start to help us move forwards. Next slide. So we just talked very briefly about a local reality. So the local reality is the official start of convolution within realities. This is a reality within a reality within the universal reality. So local realities can vary in size and the number of interactive entities or beings within it. So again, this is a local reality might be a planet-sized reality, as an example. It might be something where we collectively together as Earth, as people on Earth, think that we're the only people in the universe. That Earth is extremely rare to the point of being the only one. That's the same thought process as flat Earthers, really. A locally individualised reality is relevant to a small group of entities living within a certain country, for example. This occurs when the entities are aware of a local reality but are unable to change the reality that's being sort of presented to them. And a good example of that is what's going on with Brexit now. How does that, I mean, whether you want to believe in Brexit is a good thing or not, it's immaterial. Look at the way it's moving around. Look at what happened with President Trump coming in. How did that happen? Yeah? How did these things happen? Because people created a reality that allowed it to happen. A localised, individualised reality that pulled people in. A fully individualised reality is what entities or beings with individualised free will choose to create around them. Free will within certain constraints, of course. In some instances, the fully individualised reality can create full separation from the greater reality. The Amish have done that. Okay. Mormons have done it. Findhorn community has tried to do it. It's where people try to create their own reality around themselves and separate themselves out from that which is happening around them because they don't like it. And so what we have here, this particular very short presentation, is an understanding that we exist not in time-based conditions, but in a series of events, event space, that is all in the same space, all interacting with each other, either directly or indirectly. And within these different event space, there are different levels of interaction with it. Multiversal realities, universal realities, galactic realities, localised realities, locally individualised realities, and very individualised realities. Yeah. Some of these individualised realities come down to a very sharp point, where some of us only hang out with one or two close friends and nobody else. That's our reality, our very individualised reality. 3 individualised, for example, realities together. Sometimes we talk about a different reality and dismiss it. Sometimes we accept it and bring it into the particular reality. Sometimes somebody else comes along as an individualised reality that provides something which reinforces our reality, and they come into the fold. And so that reality starts to grow. So realities can change in size and shape, and volume of individuals who support it or who unsupports it. But within all of these things, realities and event spaces, there is one thing, in my understanding, that is for sure. 1, we create them, and 2, they're all existing concurrently. And 3, when we understand that, I'll use the wrong words now, we'll be able to time travel. And that's it. Thank you. That was it. So that this particular information came out of a book which I've just had, it's just being published right now. If you go onto Amazon, look for the curators, look for my name, and you'll see it's under pre-order there from Amazon. It's also under pre-order from Ozark Mountain Publishing as well. And it goes into much more detail around this sort of thing and how the multiverse that we exist within, in my level of understanding currently, exists, is created, is maintained, and the entities that maintain it. Because although we're here in our incarnate state, we're here for a reason. We're here to evolve, experience, learn, evolve. So we're in the evolutionary cycle. But for every one of us, there's a lot more out in the background, in the back room, so to speak, looking after us, helping us, giving us a nudge every now and then. Because they are in the higher frequencies. They can see what we're doing, but we can't see what they're doing. They like have a helicopter view of us stumbling, deaf, dumb and blind, trying to get to the centre of the maze and back again. Because all we see is feel these hedges, and we bump into the hedges.
You just described the spiritualism there.
Sorry?
You've just described spiritualism.
Yeah.
Different layers. You're just using in some respects different choices of words.
Yeah.
So you got where you are today by what? Speaking to other species. Is that where you got your information from? Is that why you are giving this talk?
Basically, I learned to meditate to a certain level where I could project my consciousness out of the environment that we call the Earth level frequencies and go into these different universal environments and communicate with the odd entity. And although you have to be careful because there's some entities out there who like to create mischief, for example. Yeah? Some of them give you misinformation for a bit of fun because they like to see us struggle. But some of them, if you understand how to work out what the information, the validity of the information, and some people say I'm talking to myself. Some people, not just me, but other people who do the similar thing say, we sometimes worry that we're talking to ourselves. Well, in essence, it may seem like that sometimes, but you have to look at the structure of the sentences that are being given to you, the detail of the information that's being given to you. Look at it in terms of, would I say those words? Would I say that sentence in that way? Would I have known that information in a dim and distant past and it's been stored in my subconscious? Once you can start to eradicate all those concerns, you start to get to a pure level of communication. And then that level of communication can be either understood or not, as the case may be. And it's if you're going to call it meditative communication or telepathic communication or projecting my consciousness in different environments, and as I'm standing here now communicating with these different entities, but from an energetic perspective, whichever one of those you want to understand or want to work with, that's fine. But in essence, what I've picked up is based on my ability to communicate with these other entities and bring that information back. And sometimes I get a concept or an understanding of something and I just cannot explain it. It's like a knowingness. Yeah? How do you explain this? And I sit there and I think, I don't understand this. How can I explain this in English? I intuitively understand totally, but I have no way of using the English language to be able to describe it. And sometimes I get, I try to simplify it and use it this way, and explain it this way, and sometimes I don't. So, you could classify it as spiritualism, but I see it as being basically another form of yoga, meditation. One that allows you to, some people call it astral travelling, but I think astral travelling is limiting, actually, because it only keeps you within the frequencies associated with the physical universe. Whereas projecting the sentience outside of the body, you can project it outside of the frequencies associated with the physical universe and into the rest of the frequencies associated with the multiverse environments as well. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was something I came across which really sort of highlighted the fact that time isn't linear as we know it, which was when Dolores Cannon did the work with conversations with Nostradamus. And what was incredible was the people that were going back to see him like 500 years ago and speaking with him to try and get the translations of the quatrains. From his perspective, he would see orbs, talking about orbs, he would see orbs arrive in the room, and he knew he was speaking to people, back at that time, back in the 1980s. So he was having a conversation with people in the 1980s from his perspective, from the 1980s, they were talking back in the 1500s we're here.
Yeah,
And it was just one of those sort of moments where you suddenly realise that, you know, time is definitely not linear. It's quite incredible.
yeah, it isn't linear. No. I mean, time is just something we've created, isn't it? It's trying to explain the passage of something. Yeah. To try and explain the sun going from the east to west. Okay, how many times do we see the sun going from east to west? When it goes from being cold to rainy to hot to rainy to cold again. You know, it's like, oh, this needs to be given a metric. It's simply a metric to measure how long it takes us to go from one point to another point. And we've just got addicted to it, basically.
Oh, the time is ambiguous. You can't unbreak a glass.
Can't unbreak a glass?
No.
Have you tried to?
No matter how you try.
Ah.
And if you can do it, please show us.
Oh, I can't do it. But is that because you're not seeing anybody unbreak a glass? Or because you can't do it yourself? And other people around you can't do it?
I don't think anyone has ever seen anyone unbreak a glass.
Right.
No, they have not.
Yeah. I'd like to use your own words there.
Sidebar, I don't care who it is.
I'd like to use your own words. I'd like to use your own words there. I don't think I've seen anybody. I don't think. You don't know because you're thinking.
Well, okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Shall we just say that as far as science is concerned, and that is the pinnacle of human understanding at the moment, is contemporary science. Contemporary science has said that if a glass is properly broken, it cannot go back in time and unbreak itself. So now that doesn't mean that in the future we may not understand how to traverse time. But right now, if the glass is broken, it stays broken.
Right, if a scientist, a leading academic, saw a glass unbreak in front of him, do you think he'd publish a paper?
Well, of course not.
Right, so what does science have to say on this?
Because no
scientists are a
never
group of
seen that
people
happen.
who largely would be scared of their careers being ruined if they said one thing that most people in this room have seen.
Nobody's
Right?
ever seen
If
a
any of
glass
these people publish a
unbreak.
paper, you'd be made a mockery of, because that's not allowed to happen. It's not that it doesn't happen, it's not allowed to happen. And that's the end of the conversation. So their career would be ruined.
Let me assist just a little bit. Break the deadline. Scientists have now understood that they can influence the event of an experiment by their very presence.
Yeah,
Electrons.
hang on, you're talking about the very small here. You're not talking about macro, you're talking about micro. Yes, that is true. But, and the truth is, right at this moment, we do not understand how that is what can happen, but it does happen, and I fully agree that that's a possibility. At the same time, nobody has ever managed to turn time back.
Do you know that some of the leading academics in that field say there's no reason why time shouldn't go backwards instead of forwards? They don't know why it doesn't. Right? That's just apparent. Does it or does it not? You do not know that your perception will not see that because your perception.
One thing for the audience. One thing for the audience. If something doesn't exist, how can you turn it backwards or forwards? You can't, can you? If the something doesn't exist and we understand it doesn't exist, then how can we turn it backwards and forwards? Isn't that in itself an example of our inability to understand the greater reality? Yeah? We're trying to do something with something that doesn't exist. Therefore, it can't work. So our fundamental understanding is fundamentally flawed. And because it's fundamentally flawed, we create a condition where we can't move forward. We're in paralysis.
Particle physics. Yes, you're right.
It's an example.
In terms of particle physics, but not in macro physics. You're not right. Particle physics, it is true that for some extraordinary reason, the human mind appears to have an effect on particle physics, but not on macro physics. You can't lift a car with your mind. You can't turn a glass that's broken back to a glass that isn't broken unless you glue it together.
So it's like you do three impossible things before breakfast.
Well, do it.
Any other questions?
People in this room that have seen things that you would not believe.
I dare say.
Lots of them.
I saw a UFO once. That's why here. They exist, no question about it. But at the same time, the pinnacle of human understanding is science. And if you deny science, you deny the pinnacle of human understanding.
Very quick, last point. I do not deny science. I deny the fact that we are limited. Sorry, I say that we are limited basically because today's metaphysics is tomorrow's science.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and therefore, science exists, but its ability to understand the great reality is based upon the limitations of man. And we cannot say, and nobody can say with absolute brevity and certainty that one thing won't happen versus another. Because right now, we don't even understand the very physics of what we're using in our everyday technology, in reality. Yeah? We create things to try and explain things that we don't have an answer for. Because we're trying to use it as a means to move forwards. We're trying to create steps by the creation of something that may or may not be correct in terms of our understanding of physics.
Everybody knows that that's true.
Yeah.
But everything in this room has been created by science. The carpet, the floor, the ceilings, the nylon, the plastic, everything in this room has been created by science. Except this gentleman over here. Except this gentleman over here.
Yeah, one thing. So,
carry on.
Going back to why we come to see you, not Mr. Lynn. What happens in your perception? Well, you know, we come here, you said, and to learn, to grow. What happens when we die then?
Well, in my understanding, okay, the physical body is simply a motor car that we use to experience, learn, evolve in this particular frequential location. So the essence of what we are, our sentience, that animates the human form, returns back to that greater level of, or greater volume of sentient energy from which it was projected from. So we don't lose what we've experienced. We add it to all the other experiences that we've experienced, and the other experiences that those other projections from our larger self have experienced in parallel to us, or in series with us, so to speak. So it's a bit like, you know, you buy a brand new car, you use it, you run it into the ground, 100,000 miles later, it's falling apart. You trade it in or you recycle it and get a new one. Same with the human body. Simple as that. And we get upset about it because we get attached to it, don't we? And the same with our old cars sometimes, you know. Some people keep their old cars on the drive even though they've got a new car because they're upset about letting it go. I know somebody who's done that. And it's simply like that. We get attached to something because that's all we know. We lose our communicative ability to experience who and what we are because of the drop in frequencies that we undergo when we come into this level. And it's very easy, it's very simple to understand this if you think of it in terms of communicative bandwidth and how when we're isolated things change. Just think of language, for instance. Why do we have different languages around the earth? Because we've been isolated in little villages with vast distances in between us. And language that may have been common throughout the whole world changes year on year. Little nuances, little accents, little changes in understanding, reinventions of words, changes of words. And all of a sudden you get one language called English, another language called German, for instance, or Greek, or French, or Swahili, or Portuguese, because we're all isolated. So if over a period of space, so to speak, not time, we start to develop a new understanding of who and what we are, then think if we move down the frequencies where we start to lose our communicative bandwidth with who and what we are, because we're isolated frequently, we start to associate ourselves with that which we are within, the human body. And eventually, we start to think of ourselves as a human body, rather than being something which is animating the human body. So when the human body demises, we simply go back to what we are, and we understand what we've achieved in this particular instance.
Same spirituals then?
Yeah, you can call it that.
Yeah, no, it's just a terminology, isn't
yeah,
it? It's just a play on words sometimes, aren't
yeah, yeah. So the thing is with spiritism, it's sometimes misunderstood totally. I think metaphysics or spiritual physics is a nicer way of saying it, because it gives us an understanding of a greater reality that has sometimes been clothed in a sort of pseudo-religious sort of belief-based context, but is starting to show links in with things that can be explained when we have a high level of education.
When you're talking about frequency, it implies time just in the fact of the frequency.
Yeah, the word frequencies are being used as an understanding of finitude, basically. It's the frequencies as I understand them, I can't even describe. But the way we understand it in terms of frequency and modulation and whether it's amplitude modulation or frequency modulation is a way of understanding how everything can be in the same space at the same time, so to speak. I wouldn't use the words we use to describe radio waves to fully understand what the real understanding of what the frequencies are in essence. I'm not explaining it very well, but it's a bit like saying that ice is air. It makes sense, yeah. It's the same sort of thing. It's a different vibration level. Use vibrations. That's the best way of saying it sometimes.
I can't see how there could be any different states of matter or existence without there being some way in time for there to be from one state to another.
Yeah, well,
so how in Earth there can ever be no time doesn't make any sense to me.
well, if we've been educated to a point where everybody we trust as an authority figure has educated us to not just believe it but know it, but without any experiential knowledge, that this is this and that is that, then we'll believe it, then we'll understand it, we'll put it as being experiential knowledge. But if you think of it in terms of, the only way we see air is when its frequency is reduced or its vibration is reduced, it becomes water. And the only way we see ice is when that water has its frequency reduced again, it becomes ice. It's the same thing, same molecules, or some molecules are grouped together as a result of the reduction in vibration. But we can't see air, but we can see ice.
You're saying it's a variation in the condensed state?
You can call it a variation in density if you want to, or a variation in finitude. It's just the frequency is an easier way to explain it.
I understand it to that extent, but I still can't see how there can be no time.
Yeah.
I mean,
Talk to me afterwards.
Time after the
Yeah.
state must be.
Yeah. Talk to me afterwards.
They're different.
Yeah. It's a bit like if you think of it in terms of our level of understanding now, our level of beingness, is that we have to get on a train at Cardiff and stay on that train till we get to Swansea. But in reality, that takes half an hour or so, okay, of time. But in reality, the moment we got on the train, we're in Swansea. Maybe the train doesn't move. Maybe Swansea moves to where the train's at the start at Cardiff. Yeah, it's okay. It doesn't matter. The thing is, it's not important for all of us to understand everything. We won't do. Nobody ever does. As long as we understand a little bit about something, and that helps us to progress, that's fine. So, if there's something you don't understand, whoever it is, or disagree with, that's okay, fine. Work with what you know and you can work with, and that'll help you to become more expansive later in other ways. And maybe you might have a better understanding, one that's above that which was presented to you previously in a different time.
So at some point we realise we are Cardiff and Swansea, with the whole thing.
At some point you might find out we're both the same. Yeah, sure. Last question. What's the best thing that each of us can do to help us evolve within this reality, or to change our reality? Well, basically, in my understanding, it's if it doesn't fit in with a state of fairness and correctness, and in a law-abiding way, you work within that law-abiding and fairness and correct way. So you reject that which isn't intuitively right. Okay? You work with only that which is intuitively right. Something, for instance, you wouldn't go about stealing your neighbour's furniture, would you?
Some people would.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, we say that intuitive is spiritual. It doesn't work. But scientists use the word, I have a gut feeling. But they reject spiritualism or metaphysics, but they say I have a gut feeling. Yeah? So scientists still are spiritual, but they just don't recognise it and don't want to. They still say I have a gut feeling, but I'm not spiritual. I have a gut feeling, but I'm not using my intuition. Because intuition is spiritual, or it's metaphysical.
Can I ask you something?
What feels right?
I know you said that's the last question. There's not many women talking here tonight, but I want to. Earlier on you said that people can't see it and technology can't detect it. So all this information you were giving to us has come through people known who are channeling it. Is that where it's all coming from?
A lot of it's come through my own channeled work, but some of it is supported by other people who've done a similar thing in different ways. Yeah.
In what? Can
Well,
you give us an example?
Well, the information about time doesn't exist was channeled through by myself from an entity that I made contact with back in around 2006. And the explanation surrounding that was there. The explanation about the multiverse, I got wrong first. And that was a different entity that told me that. And it's now to a different level of understanding, and even that may be incorrect or inaccurate.
Do you see them?
I perceive them. Sometimes I see them, but I perceive them mostly. There are individuals who do see them. What they do is some people are very naturally in tune, and what they see with their spiritual or third eye is overlaid on their physical sight as well. So sometimes they see with their eyes. I can see the etheric around, the first auriculae around people quite easily. You know, you see it with Kirlian photography, the energy system around trees and stuff and leaves. I've always been able to see that, always. And anybody can see it actually, can teach you how to do it. It's
the problem is you've got psychiatrists, that somebody comes up who may seem, to the rest of us outlandish their ideas, and they get sections and things like that,
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's an old saying, isn't it? If the land, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Yes. If you're all blind, how can you believe what somebody you can see can see? How do you?
Just saying the power is in the hands of other people.
It is until there's a shall we say enough individuals who are able to see the truth, are seeing it and reporting it.
Same mind.
Yeah.
But you can't get locked up for saying you've seen somebody. If that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
You can't be locked up for saying you've seen somebody just for that.
Yeah.
No, I know
but
that.
But psychiatrists simply think that a lot of the things that go on in the human brain are a chemical function or imbalance, or some form of trauma. Or maybe it's something more different than that.
Or they've had some trauma in their own life.
Yeah, maybe it's something else completely different. But they don't accept it because they haven't got the proof. They haven't even got proof that there's a chemical imbalance half the time. They haven't even got proof that certain traumas cause a certain thought process or state of behaviour right now. It's just that they've just categorised things in little boxes. Somebody somewhere has created something and they've latched onto it. Well, I'll do. I'll work with that. That all sort of, that makes sort of sense for a moment. Let's use that.